Femininity is back in video games, and it's no thanks to the feminists. If you don't know anything about Stellar Blade, you should get to know it's coming from a new Korean studio, Shift Up, that is bringing some elements of old video games back into gaming, and a lot of fans are clamoring for it and excited for its upcoming launch in April. If you haven't seen some images from this game, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It has a lot of soft facial features that we have been missing in video games for the past few years. If you haven't been playing video games in the past 10 years, you would have noticed that there have been some great changes in the looks of female characters, specifically any big game characters. You see this with Lara Croft, you see this with Mortal Kombat, and now you've seen it with a multitude of other games that are coming out with these defeminized women that kind of take up the space in video games and are pushing off a lot of video game players with how developers are going out of their way to make these characters ugly. You can just look at a pic of these characters where the models are beautiful women, but they change these women to something that is almost hideous looking in the game. You see this with the Fable trailer that came out, a beautiful model, and they turned her into a hideous character. Same thing with the Mass Effect game, where they took a beautiful model and turned her into somewhat of a hideous character in the game. And specifically, you saw this with Horizon Zero Dawn, where they took the beautiful model for Aloy and turned her into an overweight, unrealistic version of herself. And I think that is the comparison that we have been seeing lately with Western games, where there's a deliberate attempt to uglify the female characters while maintaining some beauty standards with the male characters. A weird hypocrisy that has grown recently due to the modern Western political influences that have invaded the video game space, whether it's through games journalists or overall investments from trillion-dollar investment banks that have these moral standards that they force these companies to adhere to. And I think with this new development cycle that is coming up with the Korean studios that have sprouted out of nowhere for a lot of creative reasons that we haven't been seeing from Korea recently, there's been a huge surge of creativity from Korea, whether it's coming from comic books, movies, or TV shows. They've been sprouting creatively, especially music, where it's been spreading across the world. And I think now it's spreading through video games, where there's a creative boom from Korea that is even launching its own video game that has the attention of the world, where people are looking at images and harkening back to some of the old models and old game designs that we saw from Japan back in the early 2000s and 2010s, where we got a lot of these beautiful models and frames of different characters that we haven't been able to see in the past 6 or 7 years, because we've had this Western modern influence where they were trying to defeminize a lot of the characters because they have this particularly strong feminist take on how women are supposed to look, and they shouldn't be seen as objects or at least attractive in any way because it deters from their overall mind or something like that. But that has been the philosophy for a lot of Western studios, where they have been ignoring at least making these women attractive in these video games or cute in any way possible. They've been trying to masculinize a lot of these characters, and it's refreshing for a lot of video gamers to actually see a studio not do that and just have a traditionally attractive model that is there and pretty to the eyes. And I think that's what a lot of people are expecting when they're playing fantasy games. So they don't expect to see something that's ugly and familiar. They expect to see something that is beyond their imagination. And I think that is the effect that these Korean studios are having, where they're trying to follow the traditional methods of actually gaining an audience and attention of a predominantly male consumer. And I think that is the case here. But with Western developers, they're more consumed with the fact of getting a lot of female game players into the space, and that's all well and good, but to ignore the male fan base, which is still over 80% of your audience that plays these console games, you have to placate and appease what their senses are calling for too. And I think that's what these Korean studios are doing here with these design models. But it is refreshing, at least for a lot of people, to see these character designs come back. Even Japan has been restricting their character designs due to investments from Western investment banks that have these moral Western modern standards that they have enforced on these Japanese studios. But Korea doesn't have that sense so far. I know people were complaining that Tencent, a Chinese company, is going to enforce some sort of censorship, but I think that censorship is going to be limited to China. I think they are still caring about about making money. So money is the main goal for a lot of these Chinese investment companies, and Tencent is still that particular company where they're going to be focused on making profits. And I think any game that's going to China is going to be censored. That's just the way the country is. You have to respect their standards, and that's fine. But I think they're going to keep this relatively uncensored when it comes to the release in Korea and maybe the release in the Western world. And I think that is where the hesitancy is coming from, where people are like, are they going to keep this uncensored? Because they're going to have a censored version for China. Maybe they might transfer that censored version to America, which is a weird concept where Americans have the same standards as a communist country. And it's weird to see that happen in real time. But that is the modern Western influence right there, where we are more communist socially than we are democratic. And it is shocking to have that standard be realized in real time through video games. But it is crazy to see this happen. I know with this studio, they have fought back against, I guess, people with that Western modern influence within the studio. They fired 2 female developers who were fighting back against the costume designs and the look of the female characters. They demanded them to make them bigger, make them uglier, and of course they were fired. And I think I agree with the studio. Like, we're trying to make money. We're not trying to have some political take. That doesn't matter. This is a video game. And I think that effort always to insert your political agenda in entertainment is a modern Western take. And I think them avoiding that is interesting, and I think compelling that this studio is willing to produce a game of this quality, of this standard, and they're not ashamed of it. And I think that is the thing that we're excited to see. At least I'm excited to see. This is one of the top games I'm looking forward to play this year. Hopefully it comes out this year. I know it was delayed multiple times, but I think it still has a good chance of coming out this year because they scheduled it for April, and April seems like it's close enough where they haven't delayed it yet, and I think it's probably going to come out around in that time frame. But you tell me, what do you think about the situation? What do you think about femininity being brought back by the Koreans, which is an interesting thing? I didn't even know there was video game studios in Korea until this came out, but I'm excited to see what they have to offer to the world, because they've been offering a lot of good TV and movies for the past decade. So I think they're probably going to do the same for video games. But you leave a comment, tell what you think about the situation. Like, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.